Peace, everyone. Peace. Welcome back to Rise of the Moors. Today we're going to go over, we'll finish the, intro to economics. This will be Moorish economics part 2. Last week we went over a bunch of information. We're basically just going to continue where we left off. So does anyone want to give us a recap of what we went over last week? You can go over your notes if you like. We volunteering?
We went over common law, copyright, trademarking, active state doctrine. We talked about executive order, that one. And what is this?
Oh, that was that's from the certified copy from the Library of Congress. They said like what book number, what is labeled, just for the record.
Oh yeah, those.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Alright. Anyone else? Remember anything from last week? No, nothing. Alright, cool. So we're gonna do the things we read at every meeting. Caveat emptor. Moors are men, upright, independent, and fearless, who care for their loved ones and follow the prophets to a destiny which is not uncertain nor unknown. They are fortified by the impregnable doctrine built upon love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. It is therefore folly at the greatest height to smell the culprits with their insidious plan to invade such a realm. They try, but their own bad planning brings down wrath upon their heads like the sword old Democles had. Intrigue and scurrilous cunning find a difficult path to travel within the ranks of the Moors. This is so because the Moorish movement has been well planned by Prophet Noble Ali, whose latent powers are abundant, unknown, may be called into action as a matter of defense at any moment. Prophet Noble Ali knows the people within his ranks who are interested. They are the vanguard of the Moorish movement as the Moorish hordes increase here in America. All of the Moors are active, not passive. A member's interest can only be in one direction, and having traveled over the roads years before, the Prophet knows where every member is along the road. A few feet below is another road where schemers work, where traders grin, and culprits bask in the sun. They think they're on the same road with true Moors, but the Moors are high above on a pinnacle where they might view the destructionists as they fall for the last time, and their bones bleach in the sultry midday sun. Hungry scavengers flying high, kept scent, devouringly crying out, caveat emptor, cast out the dead carcass. The Moors high above see these plotters purveyors, the worst that exist, hurl themselves downward by their own works to the hawk's away. Be proclaimed at every meeting. I'm glad to know that I have a few faithful Moors among you all, and I desire for them to know the truth and the divine truth. There's a host of jealousy about me and the movement now by the same people of our side of the nation that claim that I was only a joke and unreal. But now, since they have found out from the government officials and the nations of the earth that this is the only sole foundation that all Asiatics depend upon for their earthly salvation as American citizens, they're working every scheme that they can to disqualify me, so that they may take charge of the situation. Excuse me. I've notified all these things to you long ago in the past. It is through the faithful Moors, I don't know what's happening today, that attribute to the movement of uplifting funds. The ones that paid their divine respect to me in the movement will be remembered. That is why I'm calling upon all faithful Moors to increase their faithfulness to me, your prophet, and your divine Moorish movement. I need finance, and I need it badly. Never before have I needed finance so badly as I do at present, so I can show aside the discord that is facing the nation. It all comes through jealousy because of my fame and nobility. The nations of the world will not recognize the movement without I, the prophet, being head. It has been proven by my works, which I've performed in the past few years. The members of the Moorish Science Temple of America, this is the instructions from your prophet, Noble Ali. Be faithful unto your forefathers' divine and national creed, that you will be blessed for your good deeds that you saw in the flesh. Allah is the one that judges the world, and his judgment is on now, but the weak can comprehend it not. The end of time is drawing near, so says Allah to his divine prophet, I Noble Ali. That's why many hearts have been turned to stone. Many have eyes to see, but cannot see, ears to hear, but cannot hear. These two would be confounded of their sins. These are trying hours now, dear Moors, and every evil spirit is moving. They're trying every weak mind to overthrow and drag out the true foundation that has been laid, cause confusion in the minds of the ones that do believe. But if you have the true love of Allah and swear to your forefathers, you fear not what you hear or see, but will sacrifice the utmost of your very life to protect your movement and your profit. Watch your enemies, dear Moors. Your enemies are the ones that speak against your prophet and ridicule him to the very lowest, and the ones that speak against your divine and national principles of your temples. Act accordingly, and Allah will bless you for your good work. Peace, divine prophet, noble Ali. The prophet warns all Muslims to be read in every meeting. I hereby inform all members that they must end all radical speeches while at work in their homes or on the streets. Work for peace and not destruction. Stop flashing your cards at Europeans that causes confusion. Remember, your card is for your salvation. Failure to obey these orders will be a severe consequence. Work for love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice. And when these principles are violated, justice must then take its course. Any member or group of members who hold malicious feelings toward the temple or the prophet, or violate the divine covenant of the Moorish movement, will receive their reward from Allah for their unjust deeds. All true Moors will and must obey the law as laid down to them by their prophet. If they lose confidence in their prophet, they should turn in their card and button, cease wearing the turban and fez, and return to the state where the prophet found you. This is a holy and divine movement founded by the prophet, noble Ali. If the prophet is not right, the temple is not right. The prophet, therefore, sending out the divine plea to all Moorish Americans that they do their part in protecting their prophet and the temple. This is an everlasting movement founded by the prophet to the will of Allah to redeem his people from their sinful ways. Peace, noble Ali. So, in addition to what was talked about last week, these are points of reference that we can use to study it. Right? You can just simply Google search Jekyll Island, 1910 to around 1912. That's when the private bankers of the Federal Reserve Bank met at this island off the coast of Georgia and began to formulate the structure of the Federal Reserve Bank. That was from 1910 to around 1912. Then in 1913, something known as the Federal Reserve Act of 1913, or the Act of Congress of 1913, is where Congress allowed the Federal Reserve to issue its notes as legal tender, which is against the Constitution, Article 1, Section 8, and Article 1, Section 10. Right? Then you'll see after that, Franklin Delano Roosevelt issued his proclamation ending the hoarding of gold by individuals, corporations, banks, etc., etc., etc. He ended the hoarding of all gold coins, all gold bullion, and all gold certificates. Then, the following year, he issued his Executive Order 6102, giving the Federal Reserve power over all member banks and prevents the attainment of gold from all the banks, January 31st, 1934. Meaning at some point in time, you were able to exchange your notes for gold because they had all the gold. All right? Then you'll see in 1971, Nixon ended the convertibility of notes to gold unilaterally with other nations, meaning only the Federal Reserve note is not transferable into gold. That's why it's unilaterally. You know what I'm saying? So if any other nation wanted to cash out on whatever notes they had from the United States, Nixon ended that. Which again, that's against the Constitution. Right? So now, modernly, you can see, if you search, I'll wait till everyone writes that. So now, see presently from the current administration of Congress, you'll see that if you look up congress.gov, and you search House Resolution 5404, you'll see that the representative from Virginia, Mr. Mooney, in December 22nd of 2018, proposed a bill to define the dollar in a fixed weight of gold. And he mentioned Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, as well as Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution, in the proposal of this bill that he introduced to the Congress. Right? You'll also see in this bill, they admit that because of these acts of 1913 and 1933, they caused the Great Depression. They also admit that the Federal Reserve note lost 96% of its purchasing power since then. 96% of its purchasing power. I'll say that one more time. The Federal Reserve note lost 96% of its purchasing power. That 3% is it costs paper and ink, so that's the real value of it. Right. Because it can't be useless because it costs paper and ink that has value. Right? Let me know when everyone has this written down. Huh? So essentially what they did with these acts, and it's provable via Title 12, subsection 411 of the United States Codes, by hoarding all of the people's gold and giving them Federal Reserve notes, they agreed to be the obligations to all debts associated with the Federal Reserve notes, right? As an example, if you're my son, right? Since I'm the majority, since I'm competent, I will have a trust fund for you. Therefore, as you're growing up, if you need supplies for school, you need to eat or whatever, you come to me for money, right? Because I'm the administrator. I have all the wealth. So therefore, I take on all of your debt, right? Right. So when we're young, we go to, hey, mom, can I get $1 for this? Hey, dad, can I get 50 cents for that? Right? They're the one obligated to take care of us. The Federal Reserve Bank, or the members of the Federal Reserve Bank, took on that same position as it relates to us on this land. Is everyone understanding that? Basically.
Exactly.
So basically, they said, we take on all of the debts associated with the Federal Reserve note. Meaning, if you go to a Family Dollar and they ask you, you want to buy some deodorant and ask you for $1.25, essentially, we're all supposed to have voucher cards from the United States Treasury Department where we can just swipe that card and get whatever we need because they take on the obligation of the Federal Reserve note, right? You can find that by looking up Title 12, United States Code, subsection 411. Everyone has the rest of this, right? Now remember, this conversation is about Moorish economics, right? Because the prophet said, no other issue is more pressing, well, I'm paraphrasing, no other issue is more pressing than our economic security. He also made a statement that until we maintain a national treasury, will be nothing. He also said that a beggar people can't attain their highest degree in spirituality. Now, we all know we're basically living off of that Federal Reserve note, meaning without it, we can't do crap. That's why they created the Federal Reserve Bank in 1913, so that they have that power over us. But the same system that they use to control us can be used for our benefit. All they have to do is stop putting the debt on us and give us those voucher cards. Right? Now, this isn't an unheard of process, and I talk about this in my second book. Because I worked for a business called Spencer Technologies, and they gave me a company gas card, and they gave me a company truck. Meaning they took on all the debts as it relates to that truck.
Right.
So I paid nothing because it's just paper. Right? So they take on that debt. That's an example of a voucher card. Another example of a voucher card is whenever these governmental officials go anywhere, they just swipe a government charge card, meaning they don't pay for it. That's the benefit that we're supposed to have. But since we're not enforcing it, it don't exist.
Home chilling.
You know what I'm saying? So we have to be presented with the information so we can see where we can or the direction we need to go in. Because when you read the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights, the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, it says states are obligated in taking effective measures and special measures in relation to indigenous people, increasing their economic conditions. So these people are supposed to be giving us either the Federal Reserve note or charge cards or voucher cards, so we can then go wherever we need to go, purchase whatever we need to purchase, and then fix whatever conditions we need to fix. Right? But on the flip side, what they've been doing is they've been putting the debt of the United States on us. So when you read this, Title 12, Title 12 of the United States Code, subsection 411, it says they take on the obligations of the Federal Reserve note. Because a note is a promise to pay and not payment. Does everyone comprehend that? Right? So now, what the Federal Reserve Bank has done is they promised all of us to pay everything. But since we haven't enforced that, they don't pay anything. Another way to view this all of this is the same thing. That piece of paper that we have in our pocket is called a Federal Reserve note. It's also called United States dollar or USD. It's also commercial paper and it's also fiat. Right? So every time we've been working for these whatever corporate entities and they've been paying us, they haven't been paying us anything. They've been giving us promises to pay. You understand that? Same thing when we get any loans. They haven't given us anything. They gave us a promise to give us a loan. So if they promise to give us a loan for a car, just whatever loan, whatever, right? If they give you a promise and not the actual money itself, can they then collect any debt from you if they only promised you something? So in turn, that would be your argument in court, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Right? Parking tickets, traffic tickets. They want you to pay for probation or whatever. They want you to pay a warrant. They want you to pay bail. Yes.
Yeah, but that has to do with people that are doing the comments, that's dealing with Social Security and birth certificate. Those have to fall under jurisdiction under the citizenship. we indigenous citizens, that don't apply to us.
So
So you gotta keep in mind that people still plugged in the matrix,
Exactly.
and they don't understand what's really going on.
You're right. You're right. So it only applies to them because
Right.
they said they take on the debt. So since this is our land and they've created a monopoly over the commerce on our land, they're supposed to pay everything for us.
Absolutely.
So you're absolutely right.
Right.
So now, I'm not going to just say this out of my mouth and then, oh yeah, that's it, just believe what Jamal said, right? I'm going to show you from their websites, their information, where they're saying this. Recognize this?
Yes.
So,
Yes.
the federal notes name change every, you can change it. Does that just deal with like the title that they're just throwing in our face?
What do you mean the name has changed?
Or is it fiat notes to
So, people will say different things as if it's something different. I'm telling you that it's all the same.
I mean, yeah, that's what
So-
I'm saying. That's
So
what
the name doesn't change, it's just, you can call it different things,
pretty much.
but it means the same thing.
Yes.
You can call it a promissory note, or you can call it a Federal Reserve note, it's still a note. You just call it a note.
But what I'm trying to attack is like, they're basically playing with our minds, giving it these false titles, and it's just like something that, like, say if you like, I make a tab, and I call it a tab, and for over the years that it keeps going, it changes its name, but it's the degree, the integrity of that piece of work that falls under that title.
It's still the same.
Right,
Yeah,
that's what,
yeah, exactly. Meaning it doesn't matter what you call it, it's still not money.
yes.
Did everyone see this? No? So this is from law.cornell.edu, Cornell University, right? Cornell Law School. Does that say Jamal Law School?
No.
Yes.
It does? Last time I checked, C's are not interchangeable with J's. Right? So this is from the United States Code, Title 12, Banks and Banking, Chapter 3, Federal Reserve System, Subchapter 12, Federal Reserve Notes, Subsection 411, Issuance to Reserve Banks, Nature of Obligation, that's our focus right there, the nature of the obligation, because the word obligation means debt, and redemption, right? It says right here, Federal Reserve Notes to be issued at the discretion of the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve System, meaning the owners of Federal Reserve, right? For the purpose of making advances to Federal Reserve banks, to the Federal Reserve agents, as hereinafter set forth and for no other purpose are authorized. Meaning they're only used for advances, meaning it's still ain't payment. Right? The said note shall be obligations of the United States. Did I say obligation to you?
Sir.
Obligation. An act or course of action to which a person is morally or legally bound, a duty or commitment. So they legally bound themselves to pay all the debts by taking away everyone's equitable chance to pay any debts, by taking away the gold. You understand? So they basically robbed all of our families from the gold that we had since time immemorial, meaning the passing of wealth from generation to generation, which our families did have. They took that from us and gave us paper in return and promised to pay any debts that we have. Again, if your son comes to you and say, Dad, I need $1 for the ice cream truck, you're going to give him that dollar because you're the person who takes on the debt because you're responsible for that child that you just created. So since they created the problem of removing the gold, they took on the responsibility of offering the solution, meaning paying all the debts associated with commerce on this land, because they created a monopoly over this land. Right? And that's what they just said right here. The said note shall be the obligations of the United States. Right? So now let's see this. Let's see this in law. Right? This is the Clearfield Trust Company versus the United States. This is in regards to a $24.20 check.
It says 1943.
Yeah, 1943. Just use it real quick. Okay, this is from the case. The United States, as drawee of commercial paper, stands in no different light than any other drawee. Right? What does drawee mean? Drawee is the person or organization, typically a bank, who must pay a draft or bill. What did I just say? The United States, as drawee of commercial paper, stands in no different light than any other drawee. Meaning the United States, as the person who's obligated to pay the debts of the private commercial paper, stands in no different light than anyone else who's responsible in paying the debt.
Special privileges.
Is everyone following me? Right? Because, like I said earlier, a note is not payment. It's simply a promise to pay. Right? So now let's go to a different case from this findlaw.caselaw.com that does not say riseofthemoors.org or jamal.com. Right? Let's just increase the text again. Let's just scroll down. For the record, this is Don E. Williams Company versus the Commissioner of the IRS. This is from 1977. This is the Supreme Court. What's the highest court in the United States? The Supreme Court. So is this my opinion, or is this the Supreme Court saying this? This was over paying tax and the issue of what the word payment or what the phrase paid means, what the term paid means, right? I'm sorry. Don E. Williams Company versus the Commissioner of the IRS. Scroll down. A promissory note, this is what they said. This is what the Supreme Court said. The Supreme Court of the United States said this, right? The Supreme Court of the United States, well, a justice of the Supreme Court of the United States, because the United States can't say anything. A justice from the Supreme Court of the United States said this: a promissory note cannot properly be equated with a check, since a note, even when payable on demand and fully secured, is still only a promise to pay. So a promise to pay can't be used to pay off a debt. So anytime any of these people say you owe student loans, you owe this debt, what are they asking you for? USD, right? Yes. But USD is only what? A promise to pay, right? So can they then ask you to pay in USD? No, they can't. So if they ask you, well, you parked the car on the side of the road, you got to pay a fee for parking on the side of the road. What are they asking you for? USD, right? Can you pay a debt and a promise? No. So what about, when they put us on probation, or we got to go to court for some warrant, or we got to pay bail? What are they asking you to pay with? Federal Reserve note, right? So can you pay a debt in a note? And who said that? The United States Supreme Court, right? And the magistrate for this case was what's his name? Oh, right here, Mr. Justice Blackmun. Imagine that. His name is Justice Blackmun.
That's right.
Fake, right? Yeah, did you want to put it right there? Peace. Now, since a lot of Moors or just people in general always talk about the UCCs and how it's commerce and they know so much, blah, blah, blah. This is what the UCC state. Search UCC 3-104, negotiable instruments, because a note is a negotiable instrument. Right?
Yes.
So let's go scroll down to E. An instrument is a note if it is a promise. Right?
Correct.
And what appears on the top of that note when you pull out your pocket that we keep calling $1? What does it say? It says right on top, Federal Reserve note, which means this is a promise to pay, not payment. Confirmed by Title 12, subsection 411, as well as UCC 3-104, as well as the Clearfield Trust Company versus the United States, as well as Don E. Williams Trust Company versus the Commissioner of the IRS. All right. So continuing with the Don E. Williams Trust Company. All right, this is just another control search of a promise on the same case. So when you're studying these cases, you can look up key phrases. All right. Though the notes have value and will qualify as income to a seller recipient, the notes for the for the maker, even though fully secured, are still only a promise to pay and do not in themselves constitute an outlay of cash or other property. Yeah, it's from the same case. All right. Here's another quote from them in regards to payment. All right. The three court of appeals, in consideration of 401A, assume mistakenly, we feel, that the word paid in this statute, right, has the same meaning it possesses in this statute. The latter section disallows deductions by an accrual-based taxpayer for certain items that are accrued but not yet paid to related cash-based payees. Basis payees. The analogy of the courts of appeals grew between 404A and 267A derives from two earlier cases. Right? These are cases. Right? Yeah. I'm reading the wrong part. After this. Excuse me, it's this part right here. The three courts of appeals seem to pay a promissory note with a check. The line between the two may be thin at times, but it is distinct. Following? The promissory note, even when payable on demand and fully secured, is still, as its name implies, only a promise to pay and does not represent the paying out or reduction of assets. So over the course of many more is hearing me say, stare decisis and res judicata help form the common law. Res judicata is a thing adjudicated, right? It's a decision made by a Supreme Court justice or any justice of any court. In Moorish custom, it's called a fatwa. Meaning when a judge makes a decision or makes a statement, since he's part of the judicial branch and they're charged with interpreting the law, it is law. Right? So this is law. You get what I'm saying?
Mm.
So in any argument with any of these courts, any attorney, anyone, period, you can make the argument a no is only a promise to pay, not payment. Therefore, if anyone's alleging that I'm a borrower or you're a borrower or you borrowed anything from anyone, if they gave you Federal Reserve notes, they only gave you a promise to give you something, meaning they didn't give you anything. Because they could have just as equally written on a piece of paper, I.O.U, this much money. On a napkin, on a sock, same thing. They could have put it on a rock and gave you a rock, I.O.U. You know what I'm saying? So based on that principle, if anyone's claiming to be, saying you loaned something from them, well, what did you give me? Did you give me something of value, or did you give me a promise? Because I can't give you back a promise. How do I give you back a promise?
We should manifest our own IOUs.
We can. We can create our own notes.
Maybe we should call it IOU. You got it.
All right. Any questions on this? That's basically it.
Okay.
There you go. More trigonomics.
Class is over.
I mean, I feel like if you get a clear understanding of that concept, then you should be able to like maneuver easily throughout the system.
No, because remember, we're individuals. They have an entire system against us. They outnumber us.
Right. Yeah.
And it's not just it's not the Europeans versus the Moors, because there's Asiatics who think that they're black who are part of the same system, invoking this BS on us. Like even if you look up the justices of the United States Supreme Court, there's an Asiatic there. If you look up, there was recently 17 so-called black judges just elected in some office somewhere.
Yeah.
You have to deal with them, enforcing the United States Code, and argue this with them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So then the ball's in their court. Are they going to honor their own laws, or are they going to keep inflicting this BS on us? Right? Because they get paid by these people.
Right.
So essentially, they would be attacking their boss.
Yeah.
So this right here is the. I think I looked this up. I already did the Clearfield doctrine, right?
Yeah. Well, that's something that I read in the
Yeah, I went over that the United States is majority of commercial paper, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And there's other things in this case that you can look up, but read it on your own time, right? This is a presentment of the information to you that this information exists. They take on the debts of the United States, right? And additionally, House Resolution 5404. This is from Congress.gov, not Jamal.gov, Congress.gov. Again, to define the dollar as a fixed weight of gold. Here's the text. This again, it was March 22nd, 2018, not December. I think I put December. This is the 115th Congress, second session. This bill was presented to the House of Representatives and the Senate of the Congress, right? And here's the reason. Well, this is a summary of what it is. This is the actual text of it. It's a few pages. Here's the actual bill. Well, I'll read the shorter version. So here's the findings of why the representative of Virginia, West Virginia, proposed this. The Congress finds the following. The United States dollar has lost 30% of its purchasing power since the year 2000 and 96% of its purchasing power since the end of the gold standard in 1913. The United States dollar has lost 30% of its purchasing power since the year 2000 and 96% of its purchasing power since the end of the gold standard in 1913.
Negatives.
Yeah, right. That's what I'm saying. It's already before 96%. Now it's 30%. Like they started a new dollar bill or something at 100%.
No, it's saying since the year 2000 it lost 30%. But in total since 1913 to presently, including the year 2000, it lost a total of 96%. Yeah.
Does that have to do with inflation?
No, it has to do because it's worthless.
Basically what it said.
Yeah.
They're just playing games with us.
They use inflation to inflict problems on the people. Inflation hasn't occurred naturally since 1913. So it says under the Federal Reserve's 2% inflation objective, the dollar loses half of its purchasing power every generation for 35 years. American families need long-term price stability to meet their household spending needs, save money, and plan for retirement. The Federal Reserve policy of long-term inflation, that's about inflation, right? It's their policy of long-term inflation. Meaning that's how they do business.
They account for inflation.
They're causing inflation. Yes, they're causing it. Right? Made American manufacturing uncompetitive, raising the cost of United States manufacturing goods by more than 40% since the year 2000, compared to less than 20% in Germany and France. This is why everyone wants to go to China and all these other places to do business, because the Federal Reserve is robbing everybody. Between 2000 and 2010, the United States manufacturing employment shrunk by 1/3 after holding steady for 30 years at nearly 20 million jobs. The American economy needs a stable dollar, fixed exchange rates, and money supply controlled by the market, not the government. When you see the word the market, think the people. When you see them say the government, think the private investors of the Federal Reserve Bank. Meaning, so think about the word nationalizing, or when you nationalize land, you take the administration of the land, the resources, whatever, from that of private owners and bring it to the public. That's what they're doing. Well, this was a proposal. I'm not saying this hasn't been approved or ratified. They're proposing the idea of returning the wealth back to the people. But guess what would expedite that process? If the people demanded it. Right? This is why this information is being presented to you, so we can demand this. The gold standard puts control of the money supply with the people instead of the Federal Reserve, which is a private bank. Meaning, I could say, if I have all my gold, right? Let's say all of our families had the original wealth that we had. I have, hordes of gold like crazy. Right? You want to buy this cup of tea from me? I say, well, this tea is worth, 5 ounces of gold. But if you have the same tea, you can say this is worth 2 ounces of gold. So now we're controlling the markets. We're controlling the value of things instead of the Federal Reserve Bank, because they print the Federal Reserve notes in order to get whatever you want to get. You have to get in Federal Reserve notes, meaning they control everything. Right? Basically. The gold standard means legal tender defined by and convertible into a certain quantity of gold. Under the gold standard through 1913, the United States economy grew at an annual average of 4%, 1/3 larger than the growth rate since then, and twice the level since the year 2000. Meaning, under gold, that's where equity exists in commerce. Equity just means fairness, that's it. The word equity is not a noun. It is not a noun. It's not a noun. It's not a noun. It's not a noun.
What is it?
It's not a noun. No, I'm serious, because people keep saying My house has equity. How? It's not a noun. It don't exist. Your house has fairness? How? How? Because these attorneys and these real estate agents and these bankers, they're using those phrases, knowing our people don't know what it means, right? To make it seem like, oh, you're getting a good deal. No, you ain't.
House way.
It ain't a word, right? The International Gold Exchange Standard from 1914 to 1971. Remember what Nixon did in 1971, right? Did not provide for a United States dollar convertible into gold because it's not backed by anything. So you can't convert nothing into something. And therefore helped cause the Great Depression. What did they just say? That they caused the Great Depression. Is that or is that not what they just said?
Yeah.
And this is from Congress.gov, right? Not Jamal.gov, not riseofthemoors.org. Congress.gov, which our people have so much faith in these people, like they're honorable politicians and they're our government. But they just told you that they robbed everyone. They told you that they caused the Great Depression, where our ancestors have been suffering. And now we have nothing because of them. But they're your government? You represent these people? They represent you?
The Great Depression, when that started, that was 1920.
Yeah, 1920s, yeah. Because they started the Federal Reserve Bank, the Federal Reserve Act, and took away the hoarding of gold.
At the same time that the Great Depression happened, was the same time that Black Wall Street happened.
Yeah.
So they redistributing that wealth all the time.
Yes, because when you study things like so-called Black Wall Street, and you study what Noble Drew Ali did, at that time, the Moors still had access to their own gold, meaning we were exchanging amongst ourselves. That's what they call Black Wall Street, which is really nationalism, meaning we're only trading amongst our nation, which blacklisted the United States, so they had no access to wealth. Since we're the people of the land, we had all the wealth. They needed us to be part of their system, to exchange with their system so that they had wealth. So yes. You know what I'm saying?
That's the reason why they problems.
Yes.
They have to quote that word.
Yeah, which is the reason why the prophet said, get your money out of the banks.
That's why I be telling my mom and all my older like aunts and uncles who depend on the jobs they've been working there for 25, 30 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then you gotta.
But hold on, listen, you have to understand. They've been working at these places for that long, and they've been getting what they think is money for that long, and they've been able to do things with that, what they call money for that long. Yeah. So now you saying it ain't money, while they've been able to do things with it their entire lives, they think they think that they got a house, they think they got a car with that. It doesn't make sense to them that you're saying that ain't money. Right. Like, what do you mean? I buy things with it. Right. So just show them this. Show them what the so-called government is saying. Show them the law book that it ain't money. It's a negotiable instrument. That's it. It's a promise to pay. That's it. Right? This is how we can begin to teach our people that this is what it is. It's a negotiable instrument, meaning yes, you can do things with it, but it ain't your debt. And you shouldn't have to do things with it. Because getting out of this is a process. And most of the time when we don't offer our people the solution, like we got our own gold and silver, we got our own jobs we can offer you, they ain't gonna get with it.
They won't. They refuse it. They actually like hug their masters.
Because all right, if your master is providing you with everything you need, and then someone who can't offer you anything says that ain't right, who are you gonna believe? Right?
I want the state.
Right?
I know the state ain't real.
Which what they show you in Django with Samuel L. Jackson and what's Leonardo DiCaprio, right? Yeah. Massa had the house. Yep. Massa made it so Samuel Jackson had a place to live, and he was living in the big house. And he had control over his own people. So was he going to listen to Django or was he going to listen to his master? And who did he defend more? Because what Django was doing, he had to actually do work. He was traveling and putting in work. This guy just had rulership over his own people, quote unquote rulership over his own people, while the European did all the work and he just got to sit there like this with his feet up. Yeah. That same principle applies to our people. They're showing you right to our face, this is what it is. Just like they're showing you right here from Congress.gov, this is what it is, right? The Federal Reserve trickle-down policy of expanding the money supply with no demand for it has enriched the owners of financial assets, but endangered the jobs, wages, and savings of blue-collar workers. They're talking about us. Restoring American middle-class prosperity requires change in monetary policy authorized to Congress in Article 1, Section 8, Clause 5 of the Constitution, stating that no state will issue anything but gold and silver coin as tender. Legal tender. And of course, Article 1, Section 10 stating that all debts will be paid in gold and silver coin. Yes, Article 1, Section 10 of the Constitution and Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution. All right. So, you hit the lights, please. Just hit them. Don't turn them on. Just hit them.
I was about to jump.
So, as we're thinking about, all the stuff that we don't have, all the finances that we need to continue to do what we're doing, instead of relying on our people to, hey, help donate, pay 10 notes for class, buy my book, and just basically begging our people to help support us in this situation. If we enforce the rights of indigenous people and revert that energy and direct it at, let's say, the treasurer of the state of Rhode Island or the General Assembly of the state of Rhode Island, basically the government officials of the Rhode Island colony, and tell them, you're obligated to help us do this. Give us those vouchers that we need to do this. Because a lot of Moors, we see on Facebook, even in so-called black people, talk about group economics, right? Taking the money that we already don't have and putting it in a pot with people who already don't have money. So at least we're trying to, make something happen. We keep approaching these things as if it's just us. Like we're the only one responsible to do this. No.
Right.
Whenever there's a war between nations and one nation is destroyed, whoever destroyed that nation, the other party owes that nation reparations to repair the nation. That's why the prophet said, amongst us, we're teaching our people their nationality and divine creed. And with us, all members must proclaim their nationality, because in order to get reparations, you have to have a nationality. In order to demand reparations, you have to be competent. You know what I'm saying?
They just brought up that topic with the UN.
Huh?
About the reparations.
They didn't just bring it up. It's been talked about.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Additionally, if you get my second book, for those of you who have it, feel free to take it out. If you go to is it this one? It's the one on this.
Those are each 40 notes?
Yeah. Let me see what it is. Yeah, so if you go to page 100 of my book, I entitled it The Moorish Committee on Reparations. And it does talk about how the House Minority Leader, Nancy Pelosi, sits beside Representative John Conyers during a panel discussion at the U.S. Capitol about Trump's immigration and refugee ban of February 2nd, 2017. Since 1989, Representative Conyers has introduced onto the House floor H.R. 40, Commission to Study Reparation and Protocols for African Americans Act, a total of 14 times. So a statement was made that, Mr. President, do you agree with the UN that the U.S. owes reparations to African Americans? Blah, 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 blah. This is in my book. Then I additionally go over that the United Nations has a basic principles and guidelines to the rights to remedy and reparation for gross violations of international human rights laws and serious violations of international humanitarian laws, and it's described in 5 categories. The first category is restitution. Restitution means measures which serve to restore the victim to the original station before the gross violations occurred. In law, that's called jus post limitem. why you hear Moors constantly talking about enforcing the Treaty of Peace and Friendship. Because just because the Moroccan Empire isn't at its former glory does not mean we don't have the right to be treated as if the Moroccan Empire was restored to its former glory. Because those documents that our ancestors entered into was to perpetually ensure peace between the Moors and the citizens of the United States. So no one can say the treaty is not valid because we have the right to just post-living. And as stated in the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, whomever the indigenous people elect or select to represent them, the states are obligated to recognize them. Additionally, Title 18, subsection 11 of the United States Code states that a foreign government, irrespective of the United States recognizing them, is still a foreign government. Meaning the United States doesn't have to officially say, yes, the Moors are a government for us to be a government. We have to know that. Title 18, subsection 11 of the United States Code. So again, restitution is restoring the victim to the original situation before the gross violations occurred. Meaning each and every one of us had our own house, a big house, to store or house our family. And don't get confused about the word family. Family does mean servant, but there's nothing wrong with serving the people you love. Right? You see, every time you go to like Cranston and stuff like that, you see these Europeans in these big houses. Those used to be ours.
Damn, that's cold.
So we have the right to be back in that living condition. But we have to enforce that right together because it doesn't work as an individual. It does not work as it doesn't. Just like they have a corporation, a body in action, we need a corporation, a body in action. Again, that goes back to the active state doctrine where every sovereign state is a group of people bound together by common law. That common law is their ancestry, meaning every nation recognizes every other nation. But if we don't act like a nation, they don't have to recognize us. Meaning if we're doing things for ourselves, to only benefit ourselves, then we're not functioning like any other nation. If you're from so-called Providence, which really Narragansett lands, and you go down to so-called Thayer Street, you don't see one Asian. Ever. You see them in groups. Because that's how nations move. But we keep moving as individuals, which doesn't make sense. Right? So as much as the responsibility is on us to get ourselves out of this, it's also on the United States who put us in this situation. Again, if you look up the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo of 1846 between the Republic of Mexico and the United States, you'll see that the United States gave them reparations. I think it was like 12 million or something like that, an additional like 20 million or 15 or something.
After the war, their nation was small, so they needed something to start them up, I guess, right?
Well, no, it's basically since we damaged you,
right.
Here's compensation. You know what I'm saying? Additionally, in that treaty, you'll see that the Mexicans have title or right to land in Texas, California, Colorado as Mexicans, not as U.S. citizens, as Mexicans. It's stated right in the treaty. So now these Europeans talk about putting up a border and these immigrants. No, in the treaty it says they have rights to be here because this is their land too. And then again, when you read the Holy Quran, where the Prophet talked about, the nationalities of the people in North America, he said the Moors and the Mexicans. Right? So again, the first category of reparations is restitution, which is just post limiting. Right? It says this can include restoration of liberty, enjoyment of human rights, identity, family life, and citizenship, return of one's place of residence, restoration of employment, and return of property. So again, this goes into the fact that these Europeans don't own anything. Return of property, meaning it's yours. It's being returned to you, meaning it ain't theirs. Number two is damages compensation. This is where most people focus. This is where we laser focus at compensation. Damages compensation. The provision of compensation for any economically assembled damages or damage as appropriate and proportional to the gravity of the violation and the circumstances of each case. Meaning, if they took 5,000, if they took a home worth $12 billion away from us, they're obligated to pay us $12 billion. Which is again enforcing the Constitution, Article 4, which says every person shall be secured in their person, papers, or effects, and nothing shall be taken without just compensation and or a warrant. I mean, if you're going to take land away from us, you need to give us money. So again, go back to the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo of 1846 between the Republic of Mexico and the United States. The United States took land away from Mexico and gave them millions of dollars. Meaning they didn't just take it, they confiscated it due to war, but then still paid them. So it wasn't just they stole the land. They lost the war, and then they still got compensated. Such damage includes physical or mental harm, which every time one of our family members, and I'm not saying blood related, I'm saying every time we see any dark-skinned person living on the streets, they're suffering mentally. Because these Europeans are causing mental harm. Right. Because the human body isn't supposed to be sleeping out on the streets in all these conditions. They're causing mental anguish. And our people should be compensated for that. But it's up to us, the competent ones, to demand that for their benefit. It's not about us. It's about them too. Just because they don't know their Moors, they still need to benefit from the actions that we take. Mm-hmm. But we first have to take action. And before we take action, we have to educate our people. Yeah. Lost opportunities. We can get paid for lost opportunities. Material damages and loss of earnings, moral damage, cost of legal, medical, psychological, and social services. We shouldn't be paying for anything. Rehabilitation is the third form of reparations. Medical, psychological, social service, and legal assistance. Satisfaction is another form of reparations, meaning various measures which include the cessation of human rights violations and abuses, meaning they stop. Truth-seeking, meaning they tell the people the truth, you are Moors. And searches for the disappeared, meaning all these people that they're kidnapping, have to release them. Release them. Recovery and reburial of remains. All our remains they got on display. People from all over the world going to see them, paying these Europeans to see our stuff. Judicial and administrative sanctions, meaning once we speak to these people, they're supposed to invoke a policy that whenever a Moor says, this is mine, you know, they have to have their own protocol on how to deal with us. But we have to get them to do that. The only way to do that is to bring claims against them. The only way to do that is to be competent. Right? Public apologies. That's a form of reparations. Commemoration and memorialization. Just like they have Noble Drew Ali Week in a few different cities, we can make that happen here. We can make, not me, we can make that happen here. Guarantees of non-repetition. Reforms ensuring the prevention of future abuses. Reforms ensuring the prevention of future abuses. Meaning anytime they do anything to one of us, we are supposed to follow up with a suit to sue them, which creates case law. Meaning, stare decisis, res judicata. So anytime they do it again, we have something to refer to. This is what happens when we violate the Moors. But that's on us to do that, not just sit back and keep complaining to each other that they're violating us. Including civilian control of the military and security forces.
Civilian control, is that?
Civilian control of the military and security forces. What if the Moors had a bunch of marshals working for us? Go arrest that person.
Yeah, that's huge. I never. Wow.
Strengthening an independent judiciary, council court. So, All these Asiatics, so-called black people talking about reparations and then condemning the council court. How? Protection of civil service and human rights workers, that would be us, right? Right? Isn't our mission to uplift fallen humanity? So wouldn't that make us human rights workers? So wouldn't that mean we're supposed to be protected in the utmost by the UN? Right? The overall promotion of human rights standards and the establishment of mechanisms to prevent and monitor social conflict and conflict resolution. And then you can also Google this. You'll see where the 111th Congress apologized to African Americans, slavery, Jim Crowism, and all that BS. So that's one form of reparations, a public apology. Meaning this isn't something that's unprecedented. They're doing it. Additionally, in reference to the vouchers, do research on this, or you can just get my book. Actually, I'll leave it in my book. Get my book on page 107 and talk about which titles of the United States Code specifically talk about voucher cards, administrative offset, and electronic fund transfers. Meaning we can get a Moorish MasterCard from the Treasury of Rhode Island or the Treasury of the United States, whereas the Moors here, you said, all right, Grand Chief, I need to buy 2 cars or whatever. All right, swipe it on the US dime. You need 2 houses for your daughters. All right, I'll swipe it on the whatever. You need 20 acres of land, and these Europeans trying to sell it. All right, we'll swipe it on this voucher card from the United States. Instead of me having to pay $10 every Saturday to just keep this place running.
Right.
Now we put it on their back since they're responsible for putting us in this situation. But we have to demand it from them. Right? Any questions, any additions? Comments, concerns?
So they stopped this 11th Congress meeting here. You said that they apologized to Africans?
Yeah, so-called African Americans, yeah.
That one was the Jim Crow and they didn't get into.
Now for slavery, you have to read it, you'll see.
Okay.
Yeah. I have it in my book. The whole thing.
What's the point of apology for a person called African and American at the same time?
Exactly. It's a front to keep the niggers happy.
That's, I think, yeah.
So that the so-called black senators and leaders can say, look, what we're doing works. No, it don't work. Because the conditions are still the same. Well, the conditions are still the same.
And no reparations in that, it's just apology.
Yeah, just a apology. But that is a form of reparation.
Yes, yes.
So it's still reparations.
Yes.
They just didn't address which nation was harmed.
Yeah.
But even when you if anyone just simply Google search, where are the majority of black slaves from? No matter where you search, it's going to say Northwest Africa. Then Google, what is a Moor? It'll say a Northwest African. So even if our people think we're from somewhere else,
Right.
we're still Moors.
Can you see?
So either way you want to look at it, that we're Aboriginal indigenous to America, which we are, or you want to think that you're brought here on a ship, which we weren't. Whichever one you believe, it don't matter. You're still a Moor. Period. Hmm?
At least like 5% were probably brought, or less, right?
Yeah, way less.
Way less.
But I'll say this and then I'll get to your question. They say they shipped 12 million slaves here, right? Slave is Slavic, right? But then we look up Ellis Island, after Thomas the Journey deal, right? Around the 1830s to the 1900s, 12 million Europeans came here. They're the slaves. They're the Slavs. The same number that they claim so-called black people came is the same amount of Europeans that came. And now they're claiming to be Americans. Now they're claiming that we owe them something.
The only reason I say that is because there's a small percentage of Caribbeans. They're very sort of mixed as far as their.
That small percentage comes from Moors fleeing the tyranny in Europe. That's what that's from, not from. Europeans had no navy. They had no navy. No navy under Thomas Jefferson. They had no navy. So how do you have no navy, but you're going to foreign countries and you're stealing their people, which is an act of war, and you have no navy to defend yourself?
Right.
How is that possible?
You left that. Yeah, right.
And you can study like the secret journals of Congress. You can study Thomas Jefferson papers. You'll see they say themselves, even in this book, The Crescent Obscura by Robert J. Allison, they admit, these Europeans, they admit they had no navy. So how are you going to someone else's land, stealing their people, and then just that's it?
Would they paying a couple million just to travel across the street?
Yeah, they were paying fees to the Moors. Yeah. Before the United States was independent, the English crowns were paying Moors to do business. And then once the Europeans here in the 13 colonies freed themselves, they continued to pay the Moors because we controlled the seas.
And then was it Jefferson or one of the guys in charge tried to wrote a letter to one of his compadres saying that he didn't need to come up with a navy?
Yeah, Thomas Jefferson. Yeah, he was pleading to France, Spain, Britain, asking them to be part of funding this or helping the United States wage war against us so that they can stop paying us. And you just look it up. Look up Congress. Look up Congress rights to Morocco. Look up Thomas Jefferson rights to Benjamin Franklin in regards to a treaty with Morocco, and they talk about these things. They talk about the possibility of us treating with the Moors, and if they don't want to treat with us, then we're going to war. So we're going to send another minister to see what's going on. They write that to each other. All you got to do is look it up. So if there's no questions about group economics, no one wants to add anything in, we can end the video and then talk more action-based, solution-based issues. Nothing? You want to add nothing?
Good day.
What?
Good day. I recommend reading Executive Order 13846 to understand the restraints that we have on our economics.
Say it again. 13846.
Yep.
Executive Order 13846. Nothing else?
No, then that's just in full explains the lockdown and the procedures that they have to follow as far as how to deal with foreigners. Mm-hmm. So they're not foreigners to America, foreigners to the United States. Mm-hmm. So which is the entire world. So
So this is where the concept of knowing that the United States is a collection of European colonies. The word state is group of people. So we hear United States, it's united people. Those people are various European nationals doing business politically guised as the United States. That's it. So we hear people say state national or like a national of Rhode Island, that does not exist. The word nation or national denotes means bloodline. Rhode Island is not a bloodline. If you do the research on Rhode Island, it'll say, you know what? I won't say anything. So these ain't my words. SOS.RI.gov means Secretary of State. RI Rhode Island.gov meaning government, right? Nellie Gorbea is the Secretary of State. Civics and education. Law and history. Rhode Island history. Colony of Rhode Island and Province Plantations. Did I say nation of Rhode Island? It's colony, right? All right, it's a colony. A country or area, country just means land. That means land. A country means land, that's it. Or area under the full or partial political control of another country, typically a distant one, and occupied by settlers from that country. Right. So once the Europeans gained independence from the Crown of England, they changed the word colony to state. But they're still foreigners. And they still have nationalities from Europe. Meaning, so again, you can't be a Massachusetts national. You can't be a Rhode Islander. You can't be a Chicagoan. You can't be a Californian. You know what I'm saying? Because if you're a national, then national of what nation? What bloodline? Because if you do further research in older books, you'll see where Massachusetts is referred to as a company. Because they were allowed to do business here via King James I of England, hence Jamestown, Virginia, during the 1600s after he treated with the Sultan of Morocco. Right, so we have to have a full understanding of what we're dealing with. Any questions?
Now, when you say like the process of nationalization and naturalization, right? Typically that would be the Europeans who would have to naturalize to do business on this land comfortably with all of these.
So we agreed. When I say we, I say the Moors. The Moors agreed that the various Europeans who do business here as the 13 colonies via treating with the different crowns or the different rulers of England at the time, right? Those 13 colonies right? The Moors were negotiating with the various rulers of England and allowed the Europeans to do business here. Those 13 colonies then gained independence from the crown and changed this to this.
It's true.
Right?
Stop messing with it.
In the same year, our Sultan recognized them the United Colonies as a independent state. By allowing the United States to port their ships in ports of Morocco. The Sultan declared that, like there's written evidence, I haven't found it yet, but there's written evidence that the Sultan of Morocco said this. And I have the correspondences from the United States thanking the Sultan of Morocco for allowing them to port in our ports. I have that, and I've written documents.
And he was pretty much the last person that would like represent our people.
The Sultan?
Yeah.
Morocco?
Yeah.
Well, no, the Prophet, Noble Drew Ali was the last person to represent us internationally. After Noble Drew Ali was supposed to be the Supreme Grand Council, but they're inactive. So, since they were recognized as an independent state, they have the right to confer naturalization. Meaning if you want to do business within their jurisdiction, you can. But they're still not nationals.
Right.
Their bloodline still connect to the various countries in Europe. That's their nationality. But politically, they can do business here as the United States. But now, since they've overthrown things, they're saying U.S. national.
Yeah,
Yes.
They did a union state though on the corporate terms
Yes.
because it's not, they broke the peace and freedom and all that.
I'm sorry, say it again?
I'm saying it ain't supposed to be like corporate terms, it's a union state because it's been de facto. We're dealing with a European, Europeans will be, basically the Europeans will be basically overthrowing us, basically,
Yeah.
And but to my understanding, like you talk about, the United States, but we're not dealing with the state. We're dealing with, that's what I'm saying. It's not
this is all right. So this is the distinction. The 13 separate states, these are individual states.
Right.
Individual states. They said that the United States would represent them internationally. The United States consists of senators and representatives from each individual states. So that body of people consisting of the senators and representatives and the president and the secretary, that body represents them internationally, which that international body is who we treated with. Because the individual states in their own capacity agreed to be under this union for the structure of organization. So no, we can't be citizens of that, and no, we're not citizens of that. Then in 1861, European powers overthrew this union and put us in bondage under that via the 14th Amendment. So since the Moorish Empire fell, since the Moorish government has been inactive, they're the de facto government, meaning they're the government in fact that we go to, because we're not representing ourselves. All de facto means is in fact, that's it.
But but this government doesn't apply to us because of democracy. We've been overthrown because we're the republic. But when you give them the power to say democracy, that's what they do what they want to do. But
yes.
There's no such thing as democracy.
Yes, even under the republic, they still didn't recognize us.
Because it's fraud.
No, because they're Europeans.
Right.
That's why. The Constitution is something they created for them. The Prophet told us to enforce it because it's in harmony with our laws, with international law. Okay. It's based on the Iroquois law of the Great Peace, which is our law. Right? The Constitution is in harmony with nature's law. That's why he told us to enforce it.
All right.
Yes?
What would happen if they didn't break away from it?
Then we'd be not in the situation that we'd be operating peacefully. And it would be the Moorish government and the United States government on the same land conducting business together peacefully. Because remember, the Treaty of Peace and Friendship was to end the thousands of years of wars between the Europeans and us. That's what the agreement was for. But they were supposed to be just on the 13 colonies of the East Coast. Then, do a series of wars, they took everything like the Treaty of Guadalupe Hidalgo in 1846, where they took the rest of the West Coast.
Wow.
So when these Europeans or when these fake scholars just say the Europeans came here and took everything. No, they did not. You can't just take everything. If I go to your house and I start taking shit, what are you going to do something about it?
You're not going to make it out that house.
That's what I'm saying. So when you actually study history, there were a series of wars, non-stop wars between us and them. Non-stop. Even during the treaty, some other wars were still waging war with the Europeans. And the Sultan was like, chill. Stop. Relax. That's why George Washington wrote to the Sultan, thank you for the generous measures that you told to the Dey of Algiers and Tunis, because they're tripping.
Yeah.
So we have to see history for what it really is. Then we can hold these Europeans to a different standard. That's why your status is your standing state and condition as it relates to the rest of the community. Because now we know who they are. This is our land, not yours. So now we take that position of you can't just speak to me however you want.
Right.
Knowing that this is our land and we're not from somewhere else. You know what I'm saying? Any other questions? So remember, the United States, that phrase, the United States Corporation Company, represents the several states of the Union. That's why it's called United States, because it's a union. The same thing, the word confederation means the same thing. as in the Articles of Confederation or the Continental United States and the Continental Congress, right? It's the same thing. They were developing into the United States.
Just goes back to what you said earlier, same thing under the same title, even though we change names.
Yes, exactly, exactly. Which is also stated in Article 6 of the Constitution, that all debts and contracts entered into before the adoption of this Constitution of 1791 shall be valid against the United States as the Articles, as in the Confederation. Because the treaty was before the Constitution, so that still applied. Okay. So now, presently, we're trying to relay this information to our people so that we can demand exactly what's ours. But we cannot do this effectively on the measure in which we have in our minds as individuals. Meaning even us here, this group of Moors, we have to link with other groups of Moors. Right? Just like the governor of Rhode Island and the governor of Massachusetts, they're not at war with each other. Right? Because they agreed to the Articles of Confederation. They agreed to that. They also agreed to the Constitution for the United States. They agreed to that. Meaning they have something that holds them together, that glues them together. The Moors have the same thing. The Prophet already brought it to us. So as long as we're holding on to that and not our egos of who's right and who's wrong, we can get out of this. But you get to know who's right and who's wrong. But we won't get out of this. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
But don't think just because I said who's right and who's wrong that there aren't multiple ways to achieve the same thing. That's not what I'm saying. There are multiple ways to achieve the same goal. It's just you can't achieve the same goal by saying you're a citizen of this.
Wait, hold on a second. Isn't that like Moors ruled Europe? So
Yeah.
wouldn't Moors be the original Europeans?
Yes.
I heard that they would have almost conquered the whole lands. I think it was with that battle with like Charles Mantel the Hammer or something like
Yeah,
that.
732.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was like huge.
So now we're talking about modern Europeans. They're originally Albions, meaning albino, meaning pale, meaning no melanin. And then of course, there's two types of melanin. Various shades of brown and various shades of red, which pale is not one of them. But the Europeans were sent to Europe because the conditions of the sun were favorable there, meaning it wasn't as hot, so they could prosper there. Meaning we gave it to them. So yes, Moors are the original Europeans, but we had to give it to them. Since we created them, right, they're our responsibility, so we gave it to them.
Natural Europeans.
But they're still humans though. So don't people say they ain't humans. They're humans.
Right.
Don't let, because I'm just saying this. There are people who are just making statements like that, like you Europeans are human. They're humans. But you have questions?
I was gonna say, but they kind of took all that, man, like to a war.
We gave it to them.
Because on that
hold on.
level, the Crusades.
Yes, let me say. All right. We ruled Europe. Our dumbasses created the Europeans to serve us, right? They couldn't live in South America because it was too hot. They were getting leprosy, which is skin cancer. So we moved them to Europe. We gave we gave it to them. Then we left, right? Then they weren't bathing. They weren't showering. They caused something called the Black Plague, which killed 12 million people and was spreading into Africa and other parts of Asia. So we had to go in and clean them up. We cleaned them up and civilized them. Then they say, wait, we want the same power you have. And since you're stealing because we were stealing their women and trafficking them and selling them, right?
Yeah,
We don't like what you're doing to our women. So now we're going to fight you. And then we would mix with these Europeans, and then due to our laws, we said since we made it with a concubine, that person has no right to descendability. So now the descendants are like, Dad, you left me with nothing. And now they wage war against us because we're stupid. So no, the Europeans didn't just take it. We're done. We have to stop blaming them. Blame them when it's their fault. Like, hey, Europeans, we deserve reparations.
They became their own downfall.
Huh?
They became their own downfall.
Yes, we became our own downfall. Yes.
The children turn against the parents
Yeah.
because we,
Are dumb.
especially men, decided to think with the lower chakras instead of the upper chakras, and they were based on the root chakra based thinking into stuff like polygamy and all that stuff. Then your children always will feel more inclined to the lighter side of the bloodline, and then the children stand against you and behead you.
I feel it's not necessarily anyone's fault because the way that the world works, they were utilizing their women the way that they were at the current time, and opportunity presented themselves, and that's when imagination started. So in a sense, it is based off of our forefathers' sin, but the fact that they did not were coherent of your son's actual feelings or being a father in general.
Because we're in our lower self.
Yes.
So, but we can't just blame the men because there's a bunch of Asiatic women running around with pale-skinned men. So
Yeah.
it's both of our fault.
Yes.
Not male or female. It's both of us. Let's say it takes two to tango, right? Both of
Started
us.
with the disrespect to the lifetime.
Both of us. So, additionally, besides these Europeans not being Europeans, and the two types of melanin, so every time we see, our family members who are light-skinned, that does not mean that their ancestors were raped by Europeans. That just means they have light skin because of melanin. Because melanin just be popping like that, right? Knowing that we're not citizens of this, if you read the prophet's divine warning to the nations, the prophet talked about this. This is what the prophet said. Our free national government. Right? That's what he said, correct? Well, based on the articles and the different types of literature presented to us of people saying that this is what the prophet said, we can come to the conclusion that that's what the prophet said. Right?
To get permission to have a government, right?
Huh?
To have a government, right?
Yeah.
The Moorish government, you're saying. Would we have to get the same permission that the United States got from Morocco?
The United States did not get permission from Morocco to be a government. The United States started to operate as a government. Then Morocco recognized them. They didn't give them permission. We gave them permission to be here, but we didn't give them permission to be a government. No one gives anyone else permission to be a government. It's either you are or you're not. Just like if you want to be a repairman, either you know how to do it or you don't. Right? Or if you want to be a cook or you want to cook for yourself, either you know how to do it or you don't. No one gives you permission to cook for yourself. That's recognizing the sovereignty of every other people, meaning the absolute power of every other people. Meaning you have power within yourself to do whatever you want.
But basically, though, an established government has to recognize you as a government.
No. That's why I said Title 18 of the United States Codes, subsection 11, they say a foreign government, irrespective of recognition, is still a foreign government.
But internationally, you know what I'm saying? Like, so what the United States has to do with Morocco. And what was that about then?
Commerce. Commerce is the lifeblood to a nation.
That goes with the Black Star.
Huh?
The Black Star line that Garvey was trying to start.
Yeah. He's talking about the Black Star line that Marcus Garvey had, where they had ships, not boats, ships, transporting goods and services. That's why the prophet said, until you maintain the treasure, you'll be nothing. Because commerce is the lifeblood of a nation. That's a fact. Because the commerce is a representation of the energy of the people, the will of the people. the movement of the people. That's why the Europeans restrict our movement and make us, well, they don't make us. They target lower self thoughts presented to us, and then we accept them, so we're in our lower self. So we have to accept responsibility, which is again why the prophet said that he desires for us to know about higher self and lower self, etc. Back to the point. The prophet said our free national government, correct? What do you see right here? What is the United States? What form of government? Now, what as opposed to this, a free national one, what are they?
A nation.
A contract. Federal government.
A federal government. This government consists of the nationals, meaning the people of the blood. This consists of the various, whoever wants to be part of it. Because remember, the Europeans, they're various people. They're Spanish, Dutch, Polish, French. So they're only a federal government. They can't give you nationality. They can't nationalize you. That's why all these other Asiatics coming to North America, they only offer naturalization. That's all they can do. Because they're a federal one, not a national one. What did the prophet say? National, right? So should we be citizens of this federal one?
No.
You get it? In doubt, go to what the prophet said. Not even me. Don't even listen to what I'm saying. Go to what the prophet said. He's the prophet. That don't spell Jamal. Don't listen to what I'm saying. Listen to what he said, and you'll see for yourself. Look up National Government in Black's Law Dictionary, 4th edition, and it'll say, as distinguished from a federal one. And then when you look at the thing that I'm telling you to read from the prophet, he says that within the first 7 words that he uses. So anyone saying we're a citizen of the United States, or we can be citizens of the United States, use the first 7 words of the prophet and debunk them. Not debunk them, just show them what it is. And it's out the Group economics. Any questions?
It's crazy because when I was in community college, I wanted to study group economics, and now that I'm thinking about it, I actually understand what money is and how it works. I was going to sign myself up to put useless information in my head.
Not money.
Yeah.
Yeah, no.
I was going to pay 1,000 notes for that class to sit there and try to liberate
so
myself.
that you give them your energy, because it's really about energy.
Right. Hours throughout the day.
All right, so now we're going to end it so we can talk about some remedy, some things that we have planned going on here. So thank y'all for tuning in. Does anyone have anything else to add? Any questions? None? All right, well, thank y'all for tuning in. Study. If you actually study next, then study yourselves. Visit riseofthemoors.org. Purchase some literature. Get your study on. Peace.